and the undue hardship. And finally, is this a self-imposed hardship and would it create a safety hazard? And the applicant, Ryan Nix, is here to make a presentation and go over the review criteria. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Ava at this time before we hear from the applicant? Commissioner Goldberg.
Ava, did the city have a recommendation on this?
Yes, we made a recommendation of approval. We did go through all of the review criteria, and they are laid out in the staff report. So like I said, it could go either way. We really struggled with this. And so we'll have Ryan talk a bit more about why they feel they need the variance and why they meet the justification in the review criteria.
Thanks. I'm sorry if I overlooked it.
Commissioner Height.
Yeah, Ava, one more question. How high can a storage area be? Is there a limitation on?
Commissioner Height, there is no prescriptive height limit. It just, the code specifically says just must be screened by a wall or fence of an adequate height. In this case, typically we're talking about trucks or things like that, and so an 8-foot fence might be okay and sufficient, but in this case, we don't know that an 8-foot fence would really truly screen the structure properly, and to do a 20-foot wall may also create a little more visual blight, so I think that's what we're looking at.
You'd be looking at setback criteria and height limitations for the zoning district in terms of maxing out the size of a storage area. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
Correct. So, Commissioner Height, that would create, if they were to do a 20-foot fence, that would create another variance because there's a maximum fence height or wall height of 8 feet in the non-residential zones, so that would create another variance, or they would have to take the wall and move it out of their setback, and that, they say, would create a shade and shadow issue, which would impact their research and development of the structure.
My next question is, how did you look at this as storage as opposed to actual operations?
I think we looked at it with code enforcement. We looked at it good and hard, and that was really the only way to categorize this is outdoor storage. That's ancillary to part of the business operations. It's not indoor. It is outdoor, and it is storage in that it's staying there kind of in a permanent manner. So that's kind of how we landed in terms of reviewing the code.
And excuse my ignorance even further, are there limitations on what type of activities can be conducted outside in the M1 district?
Commissioner Height, yeah, I mean, there are limitations. Well, it just talks about outdoor storage. It does not say specifically limited to trucks or building materials if you're a contractor, that type of thing. No, it does not. It's silent on that.
Can you paint outside? Just a hypothetical question.
Yeah, I mean, typically things that require painting are auto body shops, and those are conditionally permitted use in very limited zones, and they would require some kind of approval from the fire department. Doesn't come up very often with this particular facility or any others that we've encountered so far.
Any further questions for Ava before we proceed? Seeing none, let's go to the applicant's presentation if we could.
See if that works.
So I'll just provide a little more context. That was a great introduction. I don't have much more in depth than that. I thought it would be helpful to just go through a little background on the company for those that don't know Circle Graphics. We are the largest digital format printing company in the U.S., headquartered here in Longmont. We have 5 facilities in 5 different states. Our largest facility is here in Longmont, about 275,000 square feet, with another facility that's on the other side of the interstate, which is about 65-70% of our manufacturing space. We are about 800 employees, 450 are here in Longmont. We have several different divisions. Our largest division is the out-of-home divisions currently in question. We estimate we produce about 55 to 60% of the total billboard printed billboards in the U.S., believe it or not, out of the Longmont location. And obviously the structure on the outside, I'll get into a little bit more why it's important to us. So the structure has been in place since 2008, and really it's used for two purposes, and that is customer press checks and research and development. The customer press checks component didn't come through in the written materials as well, but when we have larger customers that do large run campaigns, they typically come out to Longmont and they view an actual live billboard before we do large, when we do a 100 or 200 billboard production run. They test color, they test resolution, they test the substrate, and they like to see it in a live environment, so we use it a lot for customer press checks. The second, which Ava mentioned, was our research and development capabilities. Believe it or not, if you think back to probably as early as the 2000s, if you ever looked at somebody hanging a billboard, they were putting paper on a billboard. That billboard right there has been instrumental in helping us develop one of the what's called a single sheet polyurethane. So if you see a billboard being hung today, it is a single sheet poster. It's hung by one person in about 10 minutes. And that was a Circle Graphics innovation, and the industry has pretty much adopted that. 95% of billboards now use single sheet polyurethane posters. So that the billboard right now, the effectiveness, the R&D portion of it is we test materials and we need an outdoor environment, which each side of those billboard doesn't look like they're different structures, but on the south side is a steel structure, and on the north side is a wood structure, both of which are very prevalent in the outdoor advertising industry. And so when we test materials on there, we test them on both sides, because the south structure is a hurricane-resistant billboard, which we see a lot of in the southwest United States, and the north side is the wood structure, which are older, less prevalent structures, but still, when we come out with new substrates, we test them on both. And the customer press check component of it, when customers come, we have to have the ability to stand back. If you think about a billboard, the large resolution standing in front of it, it's very difficult to see things like color, how it will be viewed, as if it were viewed in the live environment. People driving down the interstate 80 miles an hour from a distance, that's what we consider a live environment. So the variance request, realizing that the property is zoned industrial, unfortunately we were surrounded with residential neighbors, which we try to be a good neighbor to the best of our ability. When the billboard was put there in 2008, it was before my time, but it was put there because if you look at the facility, there's not that area on the west side of our building is fairly remote in nature. There's an alley, and we believe that the visibility is fairly limited in that location. We've evaluated other locations on our facility and have come to the conclusion internally, at least, that we think that any other location would increase residential visibility. Secondly, the screening alternatives, we evaluated some landscaping alternatives, we evaluated walls, we evaluated fences, and to be completely candid, we believe that some of those would create bigger nuisances than the structure itself, given the size. So to effectively block a 20-foot billboard, two things actually. Not only would the screening be somewhat of a nuisance, I believe, to a residential neighbor, but also would render the billboard not useless, but very limited to us, because if we put a fence around the billboard, for instance, what I said earlier, we need to step back to be able to view the billboard unimpeded, and with a screening structure that would be difficult to achieve. So with those factors in mind, we are requesting a variance to keep the structure essentially as is. I had some pictures in here too, but it looks like in the package that everyone received, the pictures were included. So unless anybody has any questions about where the billboard's situated, I won't really talk about these very much. So any questions? Business, billboard?
Actually, Mr. Nix, with these photos, could you actually just step us through because some of these were not included in our packet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So let's start at the first one. This is at the billboard facing north, and you can see there's a cinder block. That building right there is probably the most viewable axis of the structure. That's immediately north of the facility, or immediately north of the structure, I should say. These pictures are at the structure facing, this is facing west toward, I believe that's Atwood, the alley, and then Atwood and 10th. This is a view very close to the billboard facing east. This is the same view a little bit further back facing east. We're a little bit beyond the alley there. You can see the size, the top of the structure is about the same height as the building. This is the same view a little bit further back east. This view is from the south, and you can see, if you look in the middle, right behind the metal pole, you can see the left-hand side of the south face of the billboard. That fence looks to me as a 6 to 8 foot fence, and immediately to the left of that is residential housing, the back of residential housing. On the alley there isn't forward-facing housing. This is the same alley facing south toward 9th. The billboard's on the left. Can't really see it. This is the view immediately to the north, a little bit west of the billboard, that same alley facing north. This is a view of that facing east above a fence. As you can see, it's pretty limited, and there's some screening already on that side. This is a view from our facility facing north, and those are loading docks that we actively use. That's the south side of the structure. You can see the structure is actually surrounded by asphalt, concrete, and the reason that we think landscaping would be somewhat of a nuisance in a paved parking lot.
Thank you for doing that. Commissioner Teta.
I just had one question. You say the testing structure has been in place since 2008. What is it that inspired the variance request now?
We had complaints, correct? I believe.
And a quick follow-up, is there anything at all that is different about it or bigger or
Not to my
did anything
knowledge.
change?
Not
Okay.
to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Commissioner Paul.
Two things. First of all, can you go back to picture number 9? Is that your fence, or is that the fence for the property to the north of you?
I believe that is I want to say that's, if you think about our property north and south, that's on the west side of our property, and I'm not sure whose fence that is, to be honest with you.
Okay.
It's right on the property line. I'm not sure if it's technically ours or if it's, my guess it would be ours, but.
Okay. The second question I have is, you talked about the press, which I believe is your term for them coming in to view the billboards. Where, in taking a look at this, can you show us how they view it from a distance, given this setup?
Yeah, this is probably one of the best views here. So this is facing south. That's the steel structure. And you can see there's, just to the south of this is another loading dock. And so to be able to step back, we usually get as far back to the south of this as we can to view that structure. And then on the north side, this really, you can see that is not our property. So we literally get to the end of that concrete. That's probably 10 or 15, 20 feet away from the structure on the north side. Mm-hmm. The north billboard is the wood structure that we do a lot of our R&D testing on, believe it or not.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kohler.
Ava, can you tell us a little more about the complaints? I mean, were they about the structure itself, the content of the billboards?
Commissioner Kohler, I believe there was one complaint to code enforcement from an adjacent property regarding the structure, and perhaps, I actually didn't review the code enforcement file because that's private, but perhaps there was some content they weren't comfortable with. Joni can probably touch more on that.
Chairman Shernick and Commissioner Kohler, yes, so this was a response to a code enforcement complaint. Because there was no permit or site plan approval for this to be on site, we did issue a notice of violation, and that is how we got here today.
Any further questions at this time before we move forward? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Nix. We will do our public hearing part of this meeting. Nobody has signed up. If there's anybody in the audience who would like to come forward and speak about this issue, we'd be happy to hear from you. Please just feel free to come on down. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. Oh, okay. All right. So please come down, state your name and address. You'll get a green light for 4 minutes, a yellow light for 1 minute, and then we'll cut you off. Okay.
My name is Patty Malfetti. I live at 1110 Baker Street. We, the neighbors, and I guess there aren't very many of us here, but we feel that Circle Graphics were always kind of, there's a lot of noise coming from the facility. It's a really unsightly facility. We feel that it is lowering our property values, and we feel that even though this isn't, hideously ugly, it's just one more thing that is happening that's detracting from our neighborhood and making it a nice place to live. So that's what I have to say about it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Is there anybody else who'd like to come forward at this time? All right. We will close the public hearing part of our meeting and go back to discussion amongst the commission. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Ava, I do have one question, and may not have an answer for this, but since it's one complaint, there's one source, so there's one viewpoint that appears to need to be screened. So did we do any analysis of how to screen from the point of view that would solve that one complainant's issue?
Chair Shernick, that's a valid point. We did discuss it. I know we discussed it at our neighborhood meeting, and we did ask the applicant, is there an ability for you? There's already a fence there on the north side between this facility and the neighbor to the north. Is there any way? Again, it would probably necessitate a variance to have a taller fence beyond what's allowed by code. We suggested perhaps screening, and for all of the reasons Mr. Nix just came up here and said, he had stated they couldn't do any of those. We talked about relocating it at the neighborhood meeting. For many reasons, he also stated that was not feasible as well. So it was discussed in terms of how to accommodate this one particular source, but according to the applicant, it's not feasible. So this is why we're here. And so we, it was a code enforcement complaint, and frankly, there was no site plan approval to have this permanently here. They state that they didn't realize they needed to go to planning to put it there, and so here we are. And so it needed a variance for the screening.
Okay, and then another question is, if the variance were not approved, what would be the city's action?
What would be the city's action?
Yes.
I guess the applicant would have a certain number of days to remove the structure or be prosecuted.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Kohler.
I guess I'm interested to hear if the applicant would be willing to maybe just improve the fence that's on the property, not necessarily build it taller, and maybe it wouldn't screen the facility, but perhaps it might just make the site in general more attractive, if you'd be willing to make the fence improvements.
Yeah, let me just go back to the fence. Are you talking, you see that, I think the fence that the gentleman earlier asked the question about is that you see the fence that's stretching to the west there. That was the view, but that fence on the left-hand side of the screen that goes south, that's probably it's got you're right, it's probably years old, and we could certainly update that if that was something that was. To be honest with you, I'm not sure that's going to screen the billboard, but that is the back of an alley, by the way. So I'm not sure. It's a good suggestion, but I'm not sure it gets us a whole lot of kind of lipstick, so to speak.
Yeah, and I was thinking mostly to respond to the comment of the neighbors that they don't think the site in itself is attractive, and anything to improve it might help and go the way of accommodating the neighbors.
Other comments? Questions? Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, this is challenging when we have a business that's been in town for a long time, who's employing a bunch of our folks, doing good things and creating providing a service that apparently is the largest or largest in the nation. This is something that I think we as a town should be proud to have in our borders, if you will. But it's frustrating when we have some neighbors like Ms. Malfieri who's concerned about the appearance and maybe the impact on the residents. So I'm not sure there's a solution that can make everyone happy here. I guess the way that I'm leaning, and I look forward to hearing what the rest of the commissioners have to say, but we have to balance the conflicting interests here, but I tend to, in this case, it seems like what the business is doing and has been doing is valuable and doing a good thing for our town and bringing great value to a many number of employees, and they've been a contributing member to our community. I also, in reviewing staff's criteria, they feel like this has kind of met the burden, if you will, and have recommended that we approve this variance. So it is hard to look at the neighbors and tell them that I'm recommending against their interests, but I think this is kind of a big picture perspective for me, and I'll be in favor of this variance and look forward to hearing what the rest of you have to say.
Commissioner Poland?
You know what? I'm kind of the mind, I think, of Commissioner Kohler. I'm just wondering if there isn't, and given the fact that we know that we don't want to go above 6-8 feet, whatever the current fence is, but is there a way to do something with the current fence just to make it look better so that it's some kind of compromise? That's kind of what I'm thinking about. It's not a perfect solution for either side, but it is a compromise. I think it would help with maybe dressing up the property a little bit, yet it wouldn't affect their business. That's where I'm looking towards right now.
One thing that occurs to me is that, and I appreciate what Commissioner Poland and Commissioner Kohler are saying about, perhaps screening the rest of the fencing and getting it more consistently screened as well. It looks kind of hit or miss right now. The reason I asked the question about where the complaint came from is because just geometrically with perspective, if you move the screen closer and closer to the person's eye that has the problem with the object, the shorter and the smaller and smaller the screen needs to be. You don't need to put a 20-foot screen around the billboard if you can get the screen as close as possible to the complainant. But we don't seem to know who that is, and it might not be possible to get the screen close enough to them to resolve the issue. But I definitely see the point about wanting Circle Graphics to be a good neighbor. So I'm kind of wondering what else could be done, but then we get into problems with conditional PZRs. So any other comments? Commissioner Height.
Yeah, I kind of have to follow a little bit on the legalism of it again, because we're going to see another one tonight, and that this is a variance. And our code provisions with respect to variance are pretty strict. There have to be physical characteristics of the property that require special considerations that dictate that we deviate from our standards. I don't necessarily see any special physical characteristics of this property, no uniqueness to this property, other than it's a manufacturing facility located in the middle of a residential area that's apparently been there for a long time. So I struggle with finding the factual grounds to be able to grant a legal variance. At the same time, I see, too, that the standard for screening is a little loose. And Chairman Schoener, what you had alluded to, which is that, if you push the screen further away, it doesn't have to be so high because it effectively screens further out. And in that regard, what Commissioner Poland and Commissioner Kohler are talking about, which is that if we maybe requires a condition, some of the screening akin to what's going on this, I'm looking at view number 2 from the applicant's package, which shows the screen on the east-west fence. If an 8-foot fence of that opaque character were required as a condition around the perimeter on this, I guess it's the west side, I can't figure out, and maybe the applicant can tell us further, the north side, I don't know where your boundary is, per se. I don't know where those...
I think it's right here. I'll show you.
Boxes, those,
Yeah,
is that the
I think that's the property line.
And are those your concrete?
Yes, I believe the neighbor to the north requested, this is secondhand, but requested those be put in place because we immediately south of that have loading docks, and there's quite a bit of tractor trailers that come unload and offload product, and he didn't want them on the property.
Using his property.
Exactly.
So I don't know if you could fence that north side. I don't know if there's a complaint from the north side, but, I mean, maybe a higher, more opaque fence all the way around helps, and somewhat addresses the fact that we're giving at least spirit to the requirement that there be some type of screening for this outside storage. Those are my thoughts.
Further comments? So it perhaps would be possible to do a, given what Commissioner Height said, it is hard in my mind to give a 100% variance. You know, to just say carte blanche, our entire code goes away. You know, no screening at all. Commissioner Kohler and Commissioner Poland point out that there are parts of this fence that aren't screened. So we could condition the PZR to say, screen the rest of your fencing. Be to get at the idea that be a good neighbor. Screen your entire property line. Perhaps we could even say that it's any property line that is against residential zoning. But maybe not, because we don't know if the complaint came from a commercial zone that abuts it. So it gets a little tricky to condition, but it could be along those lines. Commissioner Poland.
Is it Nick? Brian. Commissioner Height asked a question. Would there be a possibility of you putting up some kind of fence along with those wood or those concrete barriers?
We could certainly do that. Again, that fence is going to be 15 feet from the north side of the billboard. So
right.
You're going to see 2/3 of the top of that billboard, because it would be like putting an 8-foot fence here and having the billboard.
Yeah.
So I hate to say, you're probably not going to get a lot. I mean, you show some effort, but it won't screen the board.
I think my thoughts are, if it can be, and I think we were getting, you had mentioned, if it's something that we can get uniformity around that border, that's what I'm thinking. Something, whereas it might help a little bit with the site, but a lot of it would be help, I think, more mentally with the presentation to make it kind of dress it up a little bit. So it's all uniform, because you got a fence here without screening, you got a fence here with screening, you got no fence here. I'm thinking maybe if we come up with the solution where we have it uniform around the border, that would help with that.
Commissioner Teta.
I had a question for the applicant. Can you tell me, are the test billboards affixed 365 days a year, or is it a fewer day number?
Good question. I believe for the majority of the year, there is product up there, believe it or not, which is one of the thoughts that I had when we first got the variance. I went to our operations director and I said, how often could we be more diligent in taking down product when we're not using it? And believe it or not, we're on that north side specifically, we're probably 2/3 of the time there's a test material up there. And then the customer press checks, we probably have anywhere between 40 and 60 a year. Customers that are coming to Longmont that are looking at that south side of the facility. So that's one a week.
Okay.
So we use it quite a bit, believe it or not.
I just had a quick thought, Mike. As far as what Commissioner Poland was saying, I would find it a surprise to think that it was a commercial complaint. I'm pretty confident that it came from residential. I know we don't have that definitively, but I just don't see a fence where those concrete blocks are as being very effective.
Though there are just to the west, to the north and west, there are houses. It could have came from potentially one of those houses to the north and west, looking kind of at an angle.
Mr. Nix,
See that fence on the right side right there? Are you suggesting to extend that fence? See, on the very right side of the picture is where the fence ends and the cinder blocks start.
Yes.
Mr. Nix, a quick question for you. Does your billboard rotate? Does it actually change? It's currently in a east-west orientation. Does it go north-south ever?
It's just north-south. It's stationary.
The faces are north and south.
That's
but
right.
The structure itself
You're right.
is east-west, right?
You're right. It does not rotate.
It doesn't move. Okay. All right. Thanks. Commissioner Kohler.
Would the company find hardship if we were to condition this, as Commissioner Schernick was mentioning, with fencing on all sides that abut a residential area? It seems like we've only really looked at this west side, but if we condition it to the whole parcel, are there other areas where that might be inconvenient or impossible for you?
So I think this is an aerial picture, and you can see that there's the only residential piece. The fence to the north of us is obviously the commercial neighbor to the north, and then on the very west side of the property and south toward 9th, that's our fence. And we could certainly put some screening material in that to make it consistent with. If you see here you see there on the right hand side, that is I don't believe is our fence, but there is a screening material in that fence, albeit a little older looking.
Yeah, is there any possibility you could do something other than chain link?
Again, from a cost perspective, look, this is a use issue, but that is the back of an alley, and so to invest, to put a fence basically an entire city block and the fence is not, it's, for me, it's usable, and I think there's a useful life left in it. I would probably hesitate to do that, but I would be open to running a fence immediately north of the board and screening that. I just don't think it's going to get you. I think you're going to be able to see the top 2/3 of the board, and then also screening the existing fence south, if that would be at all helpful.
Can I make a suggestion as we ponder the idea of a condition? That it might be more along the lines of some of the conditions we've done in the past, in which staff have presented to us in the past, that the applicant will work with staff in order to come up with an amenable solution. Because we could talk about details all night, but then we might come up with something that doesn't even meet code. So it might just be a condition for the applicant to make a good faith effort, continue to work with city staff to attempt to screen as much of their property as possible, something like that, along those lines. I'm curious what Commissioner Goldberg is thinking at this point, since he started with comments saying he was for the entire variance, but now we've been talking about a possible condition.
Yeah, I think the challenge that I face is coming up with a condition that meets the burden. We unfortunately don't know who the complaint comes from, whether it was commercial or residential, we don't know. The person who's most burdened by it is the ball field right in front. So I see it equally likely that it came from there, but we're totally guessing. And we can't make our decision off of guessing who complained. But what we can do is try to find a condition that meets the intent and meets the, shows that we're taking a good faith effort in achieving some sort of step closer to what we're trying to get to. And when I was hearing things like a consistent fence around that is blocked all the way around, I can see that as making the entire property more attractive. However, that's really not what we were asked to review today. The entire property, we're here to and challenged by the visibility of that particular part, this big billboard. And so I guess I guess I'm challenged as far as which way to move. I don't think I would be. I'm in favor of fully rejecting the variance. I'm trying to come around to a consistent fencing around, but again, I'm just not sure. We can't know if that's serving the interest of the complaint. If we're solving anything, and then the last thing I would want to do, if we do propose a condition, is maybe swing it by Attorney Kramer and make sure that what we are suggesting as a condition is enforceable and something that the city can follow up on and that we can move forward with in a productive way.
Thank you. Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair Shernick. I just want to make my, opinion known in the sense that I initially very much supported just approval of this variance due to the economic factors involved and also due to the fact that there has been shown 7 to 8 years of continuous usage without complaint until just recently, in which case I feel that this obviously has not been an issue for the neighborhood until this point, in which case I feel it's kind of analogous to an easement by appurtenance, where they've shown continuous usage without complaint and they should be allowed to continuously use property as such. But I would definitely be open to supporting a conditional PZR as you suggested, as a good faith, as a condition of good faith to work with the residents. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Oh, Attorney Kramer, did you have a comment to say? No? Okay, all right. One thing that it does appear from looking at some of the imagery, there's not a lot of fence for the applicant to screen. There is the concrete block area, as he pointed out. It's so close to the billboard, 8 feet of screened fence there. It's not going to do a lot. But at the same time, with Commissioner Height's point, I don't think we have entirely good grounds to just give an entire variance of 100%, because there is the problem of the self-imposed hardship, that it was Circle Graphics' responsibility when they built this structure to go to the city and to ask the city, what happens if we build this? So, but at the same time, to Commissioner Rodriguez's point, it has been quite a long time with no complaints, although that is not reason enough to give a variance. But it does make one wonder, just what's been going on. So, Commissioner Goldberg.
Eva, I wonder if you could help us work through this. We have some compelling arguments by Commissioner Height, and I guess what I want perhaps is you to help defend your recommendation that we approve this variance as is and provide some peace to the commission that we're moving forward in a legal and appropriate fashion if we were to do that. And then perhaps we can touch on what a good faith condition looks like.
Yes, so Chair Shernick, Commissioner Goldberg. So would you like me to go through kind of how we went through the review criteria in your staff report?
As it relates to this commission approving a variance despite perhaps some conflicting perspective on our ability to grant a variance.
Okay. So with regard to the first criteria, we talk about economic development. We have the new Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan. They've been there for a while, and it's compatible with Goal 6.1 and Policy 6.1A. Continue and grow and maintain a strong job base, et cetera. Support our businesses in town, et cetera. With regard to Section B again, that one was regarding more like for a new development, so that's not terribly applicable. Number C, is this consistent with the intent and purpose of the zone? Yes, it is, in terms of the fact that it is Zone BLI. This is an accessory type of use, or as you will, ancillary use as part of their graphics printing business. So it is compatible with the zone. Is it compatible with the neighboring developments in terms of land use, layout, site design, and access? Well, that's been zoned and developed there for a number of years. Does the structure in and of itself make the whole thing incompatible? We struggled with that because it's been there a number of years, like as you've just stated, without complaint. And so, again, there's so there was fencing, as you saw, but it was a loading dock area, so they can't put a wall. As you saw, it's a rolling gate, so they need a gate, not just on this west side, but also on the north side. I saw a gate there too, so I think it would be challenging. I would let Ryan speak to that, to put a wall where it appears that trucks are coming and going, and you would need that rolling gate. In terms of criteria C, does the variance significantly adversely affect surrounding properties, the natural environment, city facilities, et cetera? I think we can all say that it doesn't really affect city transportation or infrastructure. Does this variance, I guess is the question, does this sign structure adversely affect surrounding properties in and of itself? And I guess we struggled with that one as well, because really it's a 200,000 square foot industrial building that's been there a number of years. And if, as this citizen attested earlier, they have some issues with the facility in and of itself. I don't know that it's the sign testing structure that brings down or adversely affects the surrounding properties. In terms of criterion E, again, appropriate multimodal transportation plan, that's not really applicable here. And then we go down the line, and I guess this is what Commissioner Height was talking about, and I guess we interpret it a little bit differently than Mr. Height, but special circumstances, Commissioner Height talks about how it has to be exceptional situation with the property in and of itself, the topography, the layout, the location, etc. But the code also says that in determining practical difficulty, the Commission can consider other factors, such as will the essential character of the neighborhood be substantially altered by the sign testing structure? Did the applicant purchase the property knowing that a sign testing structure as part of a 200,000 square foot industrial building would not be allowed? And whether the spirit and intent behind the regulation is being observed and is substantial justice being done by granting the variance. And so those are criteria that we look at, not just the physical topographic location of the property. And so we looked at it, and again, we made the finding of fact there. We talked about how putting a taller wall or fence would create shade and shadow issues for them. We talked about that the fact they can't put landscaping because it's all paved over and it's also a truck route. Where would that go? How would that look? And again, we said in here, in analyzing practical difficulty standard, the property is zoned for industrial use. Can they yield a reasonable return without the variance? I don't know. That's for Mr. Nix to explain to you. I don't know. Criterion B, again, will the variance nullify or impair the intent and purpose of the comprehensive plan? Probably not. Do we create a safety hazard by allowing this? We didn't see one. Again, is this a self-imposed hardship? And again, we just said the applicant states that they don't believe it's a self-imposed hardship because it was developed like this when they moved in. It had the loading docks. It was all paved over. And finally, one has to do about density, and that's not related to this. And then lastly, is this the least deviation from the regulations that will afford relief? Well, again, we talked with the applicant about relocating it. If we moved it, north, it'd be visible even worse because it would be all the traffic on 9th Avenue would see it. If they moved it east, there are some residential to the east as well as to the north, and so, and looking at it, this, probably could be seen as the least impactful location.
Thank you, Ava. I know it seemed redundant, but I appreciate that.
Thoughts? Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, I think the part of Ava's summary that was most compelling for me to help us feel comfortable moving forward with approval of the variance, although I recognize I'm in the minority on the commission. I think the one piece that can give us a little bit of peace is the question about whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered as a result of a fence. And I'm not a fence expert, so it's hard for me to know. We've had a couple comments come up about putting an 8-foot fence or putting the fence up only a few feet from the structure itself, and how much impact and how effective that will be at disguising or covering this structure. So again, I'm going to toss it back to the commission and look forward to being inspired.
Commissioner Teta?
I'm not blind to the obviousness of it being an industrially zoned property in the middle of a residential area, and there being what I consider reasonable expectations that residents would know what they were getting into when they decided to live there. But I feel like they've gotten away with having this without requesting the variance in the beginning for 8 years, perhaps. So I'm not in favor of granting it. I think maybe they could do it at one of their other facilities if they need to do it.
Other discussion? Commissioner Height?
Again, I'll also go back to, no pun intended, that we have a fence standard that says no fence is higher than 8 feet, but outside storage needs to be fenced. We don't really have any fencing around this particular outdoor storage, if it even qualifies as outside storage. I'm not necessarily convinced that it is. I think it's kind of more like their operations. It's an R&D facility at one level. It's a customer viewing port at another level. It's not necessarily storage. Be that as it may, it's been presented to us as storage. There is a fence that, with I think a minimal amount of effort, could be raised to our 8-foot high maximum standard and made opaque. And it's not a lot of fencing that's required to make this particular area screened. It might not be terribly effective, but I'm not sure, and other than completely unsightly and illegal 20-foot high fence would make this thing completely invisible. I'm not sure that's better. Again, back into the fact that to grant a variance, the height interpretation is that there have to be unique circumstances regarding this property that make it different than other similarly situated properties that require the granting of a variance to make the property useful, equitable, provide a proper rate of return, to be usable. And I don't see that just granting a carte blanche variance for this particular storage problem meets the spirit of that law, and that we can dovetail into that by conditioning an 8-foot fence that's made opaque around the perimeter of the building on the west and north side.
Commissioner Kohler?
Yeah, I think I kind of disagree with Commissioner Ted. I don't think we should just say that this can't be here and it might impact their business and, possibly worst case drive them out of Longmont. I don't think anyone wants that. But so I think we should go back to the compromise where we allow them to keep it there, provided that they can work with the planners to come up to some agreement. Maybe we're not in the best position yet to figure out what that is, and maybe they can dig more into the record of the complaint and figure out what it is, but maybe just condition it so that they have that opportunity to work together.
Commissioner Poland?
Okay. I think we've kind of heard our opinion. So I'm going to move that we approve PZR 2016-19B with the condition that the applicant and staff meet to come to an understanding about a 8-foot opaque fence to surround the west side of the property, coming back down the north side so that it surrounds, basically so that the fencing surrounds the part in question. I don't care about the east side, I don't care about the south side, I just care about the area here so that there is some kind of fencing to somehow limit the way that the signage looks from there for them.
So, Dan, quick question for you. Is that clear enough?
Chair Shernick, I think we could reach a greater level of clarity, but I think we're close. So oftentimes when we have a condition like this, we ask the Planning and Development Services Director to certify that the condition has been met. Otherwise, it's very difficult to determine. That can put staff in a difficult position unless we're very clear about what staff is being expected to certify. Here, if what you're asking for is a conversation and exploration of ideas in order to find whether there's potential agreement for mitigating any impact to the degree possible by screening, and then having, and I would want Joni to weigh in on this too to make sure you're comfortable with this, having the director certify that that conversation has taken place and has concluded, I think that's sufficiently clear.
Johnny, comments?
Chairman Shernick, so I just want to clarify. I think I hear a couple of things from the commission. The commission is talking about requesting screening and being specific that that would be something that you'd want to condition. So if you actually want the screening rather than having us explore the screening, which frankly we've explored the screening, I think that giving us specific direction about you'd like 8-foot screening, where you would like it, then we can work through that more specifically, and that gives the applicant some clarity as to what their next step would be.
Commissioner Pullen, you have a motion on the floor. Would you like to amend the motion?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So 8-foot high screening, opaque fence, so they can just screen the current fence that's there on the west side, add fencing along the north side so that it's consistent to buffer that particular area where the signage is. Is that clear enough?
How about just suggest possibly along the property boundary 8 feet to the west near this?
Yeah.
We're talking about fencing.
You want to restate that?
Yeah, so around the property border on the west and the north side of the property where the concerned piece of equipment is, of storage equipment is.
And the fence would be 8 feet and opaque.
Opaque.
Sounds good. Chair Shernick, Commissioner Pullen, yes, that is sufficiently clear. 8-foot opaque fence, west-north side in the vicinity of the structure.
Are you satisfied with that?
I am satisfied.
Okay, so that's the motion. Does everybody understand that? Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Tedder seconds. Any further discussion? Commissioner Goldberg.
I will be in support of this condition. However, I just want to, I think I'm challenged a little bit by what's happened because I was a little nervous in the beginning when we were making conditions based on a complaint that we have no information about. And I think the commission has done a good job coming around to something that is enforceable, something that city staff can track and make sure it gets done right, and perhaps is addressing to an extent the complaint. I guess we'll never know if this 8-foot opaque fence will meet or improve the complaint, the original complaint. And I just wanted to be clear that the neighbor who came in today and spoke also addressed a few other issues that are unrelated to the structure itself, noise and maybe just the industrialness of the building itself. So I have been inspired. I'll be in support of this, but that's that.
Commissioner Pohl.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm torn, and this is a compromise that I can come with, that I can live with, just because if I'm trying to think of what would have happened if they had come to us back in 2008 and wanted this storage unit put in, which would have been, what would we have done back then? And that's what I'm trying to do, is if I step back 10 years ago to come to a solution, would I have allowed a storage unit of this size to be put into that location? We are asking to kind of fix something that should have been handled 10 years ago. So this is my way to come to that.
I'll make a couple of comments. Two things that are driving my opinion on this. One is actually the Envision Longmont criteria, which is that we are trying to be business friendly. I hear people talk about Longmont shouldn't be boulderized, and I've been asking people what that means, and I think a lot of people here see that as Longmont is business friendly. We certainly, like Commissioner Kohler said, we don't want to deny this variance altogether because that's not the friendliest thing to do. It appears that Circle Graphics, in our packet, we had some information that they've been working with the neighborhood on their repaving project. They seem to be aware that they are an industrial concern in the middle of residences, and they're trying to be a good neighbor. So that makes me in favor of giving them some variance, not 100% variance. The other thing is that we have this one criterion, whether the spirit and intent behind the regulation would be observed and substantial justice done by granting the variance. The variance that they're asking for is a 100% variance to completely wipe out our regulation. So that doesn't serve the spirit and intent behind the regulation, and it doesn't actually do justice. Even though the fence itself might be ineffective because it's not tall enough because it's so close to the billboard, it is symbolic to some extent of Circle Graphics being a good neighbor and doing some justice for the fact that they've been going 8 years with a structure that they never got approval for. So I like the idea of our condition, even though it may not solve the problem. It's perhaps not intended to solve the problem. Any other comments? Shall we take a vote? So PZR 2016-19B passes with the conditions as stated, 7-0. So this item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period, which begins on Thursday, September 22 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, September 28 at 5 p.m. Mr. Nix, thank you very much for your application. Appreciate your time and effort coming here tonight. Ava, thank you for your presentation on this. We will go to the next item on our agenda.
Can I ask a quick question? So saying we agree to the 8-foot fence on the west and the north side, we get another complaint after that. What's the protocol? You know, somebody says this isn't sufficient to what the spirit of the zone is. Are we technically in compliance at that point?
Joni or Dan, do you want to take that?
Chair Shernick, I think that's a fair question. I don't think it's a question for the commission to answer. That can be explored at a later time.
With city staff?
With city staff, yes.
Okay. All right. Does that make sense, Mr. Nix?
Not really, because if we agree to this, I want to make sure that we've kind of dealt with the issue, and it doesn't sound like there's a definitive answer to that. If we spend the money to put a fence up on the west and the north side, zero return on investment for our company, right? We want to be good neighbors, but we also want to make sure that we're not back here dealing with the same issue 5 years from now.
So this is not a matter of us coming to an agreement right here and now. Basically, the commission has made a finding and has made a decision, if that clarifies for you.
Right. I understand that, but it's hard for me. I'm putting the pieces together and trying to say, okay, if we do this, which we're required to do, could we potentially be back here with a complaint about the same issue because the billboard is visible by our new residential neighbor, for instance, that moves in on the east side of the facility or the west side of the facility?
Dan?
Chair Shernick, I think that the next conversation to happen should be between the applicant and staff. The commission has made its decision, and that's final.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nix. All righty. Next item on our agenda is Meadowview Estates preliminary subdivision plat and variance from lot diversity standards with senior planner Ava Parachevsky.
Good evening, Chair Shernick and Commissioners. Ava Pahajevsky, Planning and Development Services. Again, this is the Meadowview Estates preliminary plat and variance application. I'm going to give you some project orientation. So where the red star is, this is the property. This would be in southwest Longmont. This would be, sorry, my pointer there, we're way west of Airport Road. This is a future collector street called Mount Audubon Drive. This is Clover Basin Drive up here. This is Pike Road over here. And Renaissance Drive comes down this way. And so this is this is the southwest area of Longmont. This is the Portico subdivision in Boulder County. And the adjacent subdivisions, one you may have seen more recently is the Clover Basin Ranch subdivision that's under construction currently. This is the Somerset Fifth Filing subdivision. We did a big annexation agreement amendment on that one, and the Call annexation. And these two are under construction. And over here is the Tremonto subdivision. So that kind of brings you into where the location is. It's a 10-acre property, and it's zoned R1, single-family residential. This is different from ones you probably have seen before. This subdivision is just a plat. That's all you're looking at. This is not a PUD zone, so we're not reviewing house designs and development plans and setbacks here. We're just reviewing the subdivision regulations. The maximum density in the R1 is 5 dwelling units per acre. So for this site, the maximum is 50. We have 24 lots proposed in this subdivision. Apologies for the grainy photo here, but this is the subdivision. This right here on the west is Mount Audubon Drive, which is where the main access point will be. And then they will cut in a new public street right in the middle of the property right here. The annexation agreement, when this property was annexed, encumbered the property to provide a 2-acre city park dedication, and that's over here on the east side. That's the 2 acres. In addition to being required to provide land for a future city park, they also are required to provide common open space in a pocket park, like all other subdivisions. And so right here on the east is a pocket park, and then they also have a landscape buffering down here on the south from what would be the Call subdivision, North Star, sorry, and on the north, the Clover Basin Ranch subdivision. And so they're requesting a 24-lot preliminary plat. That's the nuts and bolts of it. They are requesting a variance. We have a residential design standard in our code, in our subdivision regulations, and it says that no more than 20% of lots in a subdivision can be similar or within 1,000 square feet of one another. So typically we have applicants do a table and break it down to confirm that we don't have more than that percentage exceeded. And so I've done a little table up for you at the top. The lots, pretty big. They're bigger. The minimum lot size in the R1, I'll put this in perspective, is 5,500 square feet. Their minimum is 7,500 square feet, and they go all the way up to 10,600. So I broke it down, and I think it was in the applicant's submittal as well. But so if we break it down between 7,500 and 85 and so forth, It looks like we've got 10 lots that are about 50% and 9 lots that generate about 37% that are within 1,000 feet of one another, square feet. And the intent of that code section was really for like the bigger subdivisions. For example, just to the east of this property is the Somerset Fifth Filing, and that was over 200 lots. And so that was really the spirit and intent of that code section, was to get like a really large subdivision and create some diversity, so you're not having a lot of cookie cutter lots over and over. And so this lot, its extenuating circumstances, as you can see, is kind of long and narrow. And the other extenuating circumstance that's not typical with other subdivisions is most subdivisions aren't encumbered with a 2-acre city land dedication for a park. And so when you cut that out, and then you cut out the acre of the landscaping open space, it starts to get real tight in there. And so they're requesting a variance for that reason. Some of the other, some of the other issues that were identified as we went through project review, we had the applicant do a species and habitat report. Prairie dogs were observed on the site. They didn't see any endangered species, but they did see some nests in the trees, and so their consulting environmentalist recommended that they not start construction between May to August unless they do a bird and bat survey, which is typical, and we've conditioned this before on other subdivisions, and that's something staff would handle through the platting process. We had a couple of really loose end, little nitpicky, fix this typo type of thing, corrections from our DRC staff, and so we'll have that tied up before it got platted. But I think the main thing was we received a letter from St. Vrain Valley School District regarding school capacity. We have a section in our land development code that we have an intergovernmental agreement between ourselves and St. Vrain Valley Schools that says a city can't record a plat when the adjacent school capacity exceeds 125% of capacity within 5 years. St. Vrain notified us that Blue Mountain will exceed that in 5 years, but Altona and Silver Creek were fine. It was just Blue Mountain. They've told us that Blue Mountain is closed to open enrollment so that they can kind of catch up there. In the meantime, that doesn't preclude the commission from approving a preliminary plat, which is all you have in front of you today. Final plats are then approved administratively by staff. If they're consistent with the preliminary plat, that's approved by the commission. And we can't record that final plat until we get the correspondence from the school district, and the applicant is aware of that and understands that. So that's where we stand today. And so this project, we felt, met the review criteria for approval of both the subdivision. It met all our criteria for that, as well as the variance. We did make about 3 or 4 conditions, and again, these are the ones I touched on the issues. And one is, and that's the big one, is that we get confirmation from the school district that benchmarks are not exceeding anymore, and that we have DRC finish reviewing the plans, and that we don't start construction between March and November unless they do a bird and bat survey and confirm that we don't have that present. And finally, that they comply with our prairie dog regulations that we have in the code about making good faith efforts for relocation. And with that, we do have the applicant, Joel Siemens from Park Engineering, or Ken Spencer, the property owner, are both here to do a presentation.
Just a quick question for you before they set up their presentation, Ava. What happens if the school numbers never come down enough? I mean, would they lose their entitlements after 5 years or something like that?
So, Chair Shernick, in our land development code, preliminary plats are good for 3 years, and so they have 3 years to complete that. And then there's also a provision in the code that says they can request an extension and come back to you and ask for another extension if they're waiting on that till then.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Kohler?
Isn't there a bond proposed to alleviate that rather soon?
Yes, Commissioner Kohler. So we were told by St. Vrain Valley Schools that should the bond measure pass, that they would be able to send us a letter stating that this project could move forward and the plat could be recorded.
Other questions at this time for Ava? Nope. Okay, for the applicant now.
Hello, my name is Joel Siemens with Park Engineering. Our office is at 420 21st Street in Longmont. Just to continue on the introductions, myself and Ken Spencer and Kevin Molshine behind us that can answer some of the more questions with regards to ownership. I wanted to give you a brief history on the parcel itself. The annexation happened around 2004, 2003, with referred to as a call annexation. We helped individual John Ray with developing it, and we were here actually August 24th, 2011 with preliminary plat approval. And that went forward. We were going to take it to final plat, but it had lapsed that 3-year period, so we went back to the drawing board. But still in line with the intent of the annexation, the bigger piece being the granting of the park on the east side if it was to be platted for residential. The packet that Ava has provided did outline a lot of the review criteria analysis. I did want to review some of it. And feel free to ask me any questions about the criteria with regards to the preliminary plat or the variance. So there's 2 sets of review criteria. The important part is that we're not exceeding or trying to max out the site. Again, we're allowable density is about 5 units per acre, and we're coming in at 2.4, so about half of what's allowed. The compatibility between all the other developments to the north is Clover Basin, R1, and to the south, the North Star, also R1. To the west is Portico, so it's more of estate lots, and so that's sort of the feel that we combine the two with a bigger lot, and so that it's situated right in the middle. So if I were to go back a slide, Ava, could I use? Oh, here we go. Perfect. And then do I just double click this then? From beginning. There we go. Oh, there. Oh, great. Super. Great. So she had talked about how the site is tight, and being an engineer, I like to be short and sweet and more numbers oriented. So here is on the east side is the park dedication, contingent to the platting, of course, to the city, and then the city had requested a drainage well on the north side and the south side, and this is to help facilitate the drainage from the back lots of the north one and the back lots from both adjacent properties to sort of share the drainage swale and come out. So that'll be a dedicated outlot by itself that will funnel the drainage through and then into the drainage facilities. The other criteria, I mean, besides I call it the bowling alley because of the configuration of it all. There's not a lot of creativity to allow the diversification of lots. We have tried, and we succeeded about getting different lot sizes with each continuous lot, and we tried to get the biggest stratum as we could. One of the other criteria is we were held to a north-south avenue because Clover Basin to the north was platted. We had a tie-in point there, and also the city had requested a pedestrian throughway here. So that sort of set a lot of our west-east spacing, and so that sort of limited our ability to diversify. Some iterations on the east end had a hammerhead, but after talking with Fire and Mark Sampson, they said, well, a sweep will be better, and it will also flow easier into the North Star property to the south when that goes forward. Ava had talked about the habitat and the school. I don't want to be overly repetitive or boring, so I'll try to wrap up here. The development is meeting the drainage criteria. Oh, the utilities will not be overburdened because the underdrain system and the sanitary and the water are all looped through. We're also designing the Clover Basin system, so it is fully integrated with ties to the north and actually as it goes out to the east as well to Toronto and all those properties there. And so basically that's it. We're looking forward to the preliminary plat of this project and granting the acreage on the east side to the city. And if you have any questions for me or our ownership team, please feel free. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Siemens. Any question for Mr. Siemens at this time? Commissioner Height.
Yes, thank you. It's an odd question to ask you because you guys seem to be the density issues. I can see it, and you've kind of lessened the density and put up. Am I on? And put in kind of good-sized lots. My question to you is, to meet this 20% threshold, in my mind, you could have gone down a little bit or added some smaller lots, or you could have added a bigger lot. How did you come up with this particular mix? I understand it looks like your sweet spot's not huge, like Portico in the estate lots, and maybe some of the other surrounding lots. How did you come to this particular mix?
I can't speak to the marketing side of it, so the price point I'm not too familiar with. I do know that the 20% played a part because we didn't want to defer too much from the annexation, because if we did that, that'd throw us into a whole nother category. And so we differentiated enough to where we hit that 24 and then gave it a comfortable footprint so that the widths would be enough to allow a variety of different footprint styles. So not only, one thing we haven't talked about is there's horizontal separation this way with lot sizes, but also there's some vertical relief off the street, and so each adjacent house has to be so many feet up and back, and so that'll allow with these slightly bigger lots to so Fred could have type A lot on that lot, you know, and allow for that diversification rather than, well, lots 2 through 5 or just this type lot and you're stuck with it. So it did help with selection and catering to the client, to the end user. Hopefully I answered your question.
And did you look at smaller lots?
No, because we'd be coming over above the 24 number. So
24 was. Is that in your annexation agreement?
Yeah, it was. There was some lots. There's some lots set forth in the annexation agreement, so we didn't want to differentiate too much from that.
Commissioner Pollan.
So one thing that isn't specified here, it says, so the variance is required so that currently you're above the 20% of the lots to be within 1,000 square feet. Because you're asking to have more than 20. Where are you at with the percentage? How many, what percentage are you within 1,000 square feet?
Well, the 4 categories that I put on this slide was 7,500 to 8,500, 8,500, 9,500, and so on, in increments of 1,000. The lower echelon from 75 to 8,500, where 42% of the lots are that size. And then the next step up for 85 to 9,500 are 37%. And then it goes to 13 and to 8. So we weren't at the 20-20-20-20, but we did try to get enough diversification to where we had 4 distinct lot sizes.
Any other questions at this time? Thank you, Mr. Siemens. This is a public hearing item, so we will open up the public hearing. Nobody has signed up to speak, but if somebody's in the audience who'd like to come forward and talk, we'd be happy to have you come down. Anybody? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll go back to discussion amongst the commission. Commissioner Teta.
I don't really feel like the lot diversity is the right way to phrase it. It doesn't take into account anything about the shape of the lot, only about the number of square feet. And I think the shape of these lots shows that just changing the number of square feet really doesn't do much to give you any or almost any diversity between them. So I don't have any qualms at all about ignoring that and granting that variance.
Other comments? Commissioner Poland?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Ted. In looking at it with this small piece of property and with the fact that you have to have the east-west street and then you have it kind of do the little curve there on the south where it has to do, I believe it has to have the connector. You really don't have a lot of room to try to maneuver here. So I think they've done a good job with what they've got.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion somebody would like to put forward? Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, I'd like to echo. Well, I will not echo them, but I agree with with Commissioner Teta and Commissioner Poland. And with that in mind, I guess I'll go ahead and make the motion that we move to approve PCR 2016-18B, which is with the conditions that the applicant satisfy all the outstanding requirements on the project plans and meet the requirements of the species and habitat standards.
Okay, we have a motion to approve PZR 2016-18B. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Teta seconds. Any further discussion?
Please.
Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, I just wanted, because it's another variance, I want to weigh in on my variance theory, which is, in this particular circumstance, I do believe that there are unique physical characteristics of this subdivision that aren't necessarily self-imposed, and that what the applicant has tried to do with respect to coming up with a, four-category blend that doesn't necessarily meet our standard, it has nonetheless demonstrated an intent to meet the spirit of this law, and I would also favor granting a variance in this circumstance.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would concur with your analysis about the variance meeting the review criteria. Also, just another note that it appears that as we get further in this project, there will be ample opportunities to vary the look and feel of the streetscape as the project moves forward with, as Mr. Siemens pointed out, architectural changes, design changes from house to house. So, further discussion? Seeing none, let's take a vote. Okay, that passes 7-0. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, September 22 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, September 28 at 5 p.m. Mr. Siemens, oh, they already left the room. Well, thank you very much for your project. Okay, I think we probably should take a break at this point because we have 2 more projects to go through. So let's take a 5-minute break as our planners.
But yeah,
What's that?
Please don't add another one.
No, there's also the Quail Commercial Center. Oh, yeah, there's just one.
What?
No, there's 2.
There's 2.
There's Peakview and Quail.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 more to
Quail
go.
just wasn't hyperlinked.
Yeah. So, okay, we're going to take a break for 5 to 7 minutes. Going on with item number 8 on our agenda, Peak View Annexation Concept Plan and Zoning with Senior Planner Karen Bryant. Take it away. Oops.
Okay, let's try that again. Thank you, Chairman Shernick, Commissioners. The application before you is the Peak View annexation, which includes the concept plan and zoning. To orient yourself as to where we're at, the red, it's essentially a rectangular property. It's approximately 7 acres, located at 2725 West 9th Avenue. The surrounding land uses, just to the north is the Twin Peaks Golf Course. To the south is also public land. It's the Golden Ponds Park. East we have unincorporated Boulder County. And then directly to the west is Plan Unit Development Residential, specifically the Valley Subdivision. Just to orient yourself, this is 9th Avenue right along here. So the application was submitted in February of 2016. The Development Review Committee has completed 2 reviews of the application, and we have finalized the proposed annexation concept plan and zoning with regard to all of the statutory requirements, as well as compliance with the City of Longmont Comprehensive Plan, also known as Envision Longmont, and the city's Land Development Code. Again, the property is 7 acres. The existing use and zoning in the county is agriculture. The Envision Longmont land use designation is single-family neighborhood, and the proposed zoning is R1 residential low density. So the concept plan, fairly simple. The R1 zoning that they are requesting is appropriate for the land use designation in Envision Longmont. It is 27 single-family lots. There are also 3 small open space areas and 1 pocket park included, as well as a proposed detention area for drainage. There are 2 accesses to the property. One is to the north along 9th Avenue, and the second is along Wade Road, coming from the existing Valley subdivision. The annexation will include adequate right of way of 9th Avenue, so that when the city looks to expanding and building that out, the right of way is provided. For the annexation, for the review criteria, and this is looking at both the common review standards for all land use applications as well as those specific to the annexation. The annexation is consistent with Envision Longmont. There is adequate capacity available for street and utility design layout. The proposed land uses is consistent with zoning and compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. No adverse impacts to the environment, neighbors, or city facilities. The concept plan has appropriate transportation plan layout. The annexation complies with Municipal Annexation Act of 1965. The property is within the municipal service area of Envision Longmont, and the proposed zoning is appropriate and consistent with Envision Longmont designation. And the annexation does not pose development constraints on adjacent property. The staff report goes into these review criteria in more detail, and if there are any questions from the commissioners, I can go into those. Part of the review process for this included a neighborhood meeting, and we did receive some comments from the public after the application was received. The 2 main concerns that the neighborhood had and that we received from the public had to do with traffic, increased traffic along 9th Avenue, as well as possible changes to existing drainage patterns and possible effects to existing wells in the area. As part of the application, the applicant did submit a traffic study, and staff reviewed the study and agrees with it that The proposed development is not going to exceed the capacity for 9th Avenue as it exists. However, at the time of development, the applicant will need to request a spacing variance for the proposed Peakview Avenue, and they will need to put in a left-hand turn lane into the development, and however, no right turn lane was required. In addition, this is just the annexation phase. As they go through to development, the property, while not in any of the FEMA designated floodplains, part of the review process for the platting is that they're going to have to give us a detailed drainage plan to make sure that they are not affecting any of the existing wells and that the drainage is being dealt with appropriately. And staff is recommending approval of the annexation request to the Planning and Zoning Commission, finding that the review criteria have been met. Staff is not recommending any conditions, and that is reflected in Resolution PZR 2016-17A. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Karen at this time? Great. Thank you very much, Karen. Is the applicant going to make a presentation?
Yes, the applicant does have a presentation.
Okay, great. We'll move on to that. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening. My name's Bob Young. I'm the project manager for the Peakview project. By way of background, this is our third project in Longmont, and as it happens, all the projects we've done have been on 9th Avenue. We developed Stonebridge apartment complex, which is 172 units of apartment on 9th and Hover, and we developed the Vistas, which is 124 unit senior housing congregate care facility on the actual corner of 9th and Hover. This project is a little bit different in that it's an infill. It's planned within the city's comprehensive plan for the kind of use we're requesting. It's fairly simple. As Karen said, it's a rectilinear project bisected by a single road with double-fronted lots on either side of the road, and is currently served by municipal utilities from Longmont, water, sewer, and power. So we feel it makes a lot of sense for this project to come into the city and be zoned for low-density residential single-family detached housing. And I think we feel that this is going to add another opportunity for a diversity of housing style available in the community as we go forward. All that being said, that's all I really wanted to share with you, and I'm prepared to answer any questions that you may have. From a technical standpoint, Don Park, our project engineer, is present here as well, should you have questions in that regard.
Any questions for Mr. Young at this time? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Karen, I actually did think of one question for you. In our packet, there was some reference to this project being in the airport influence zone, and this might be for Dan or for Joni as well. But can you clarify for us what effect that might have on this project?
Yes, we did send a referral to the Airport Advisory Board, and they did respond. They are in favor of the annexation itself, but they are not in favor of the residential development. The letter that was included in your packet that includes information as to why their biggest concern is the noise that can be associated with the airport itself affecting the residences. As far as it affecting your recommendation this evening, they're very similar to the Planning and Zoning Commission in that they make a recommendation to City Council. But their biggest concern is really within the airport influence zone. They're opposing the residential aspect. Afraid the effects it might have on the neighbors.
Okay, so, Dan, you want to jump in?
Chair Shernick, I agree with Karen, I'd have a different emphasis. Looking at the Airport Advisory Board's powers and duties under Section 2.94.040 of the Code, the powers of the Airport Advisory Board shall be advisory only, and the board shall have the following duties: to review and recommend on a regular basis a long-range master plan for the airport, to review and recommend to City Council actions concerning lease rates, fees, annual budget for the airport, to annually review and recommend to City Council actions concerning the master lease documents, to review and recommend to City Council actions concerning any proposed lease that is significantly different from the master lease documents, to review and recommend to City Council annual goals and objectives for operation and development of the airport, to review and recommend to City Council actions concerning the airport rules and revisions thereto, to present to City Council an annual report concerning the status of the airport, and to promote the awareness, utilization, and development of the airport pursuant to and consistent with the council-adopted goals and objectives and master plan. The reason I walk you through all of that is because it is not a power and duty of the Airport Advisory Board to make official recommendations with regard to development applications. I want to make sure that this commission understands that. This commission is free to take into consideration any evidence that is presented before it, but recommendations on approval of applications for development such that this board reviews is not within the purview of the Airport Advisory Board.
Okay, and just to be clear, we are making a recommendation to City Council. We are not the final deciding body on this because it's an annexation. Correct?
Chair Shernick, correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for Karen at this time? Commissioner Pullen?
Karen, can you go over real quickly the piece of property to the east, which I believe you indicated was unincorporated Boulder County?
Yes.
Are there any plans for that, or currently any houses on that property? What's currently there? And if there's any short-term plans that we know about?
Commissioner Pullen, yes, the property immediately to the east is unincorporated Boulder County. It's similar in size to the Peakview annexation property. There is a single-family residence on it, but at this point, the city is unaware of any plans for development of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing item, so we'll open up the public hearing part of this meeting. And there are people signed up to speak. Let's see if anybody's still here. So we'll start with the list, and then we'll go to people who are in the audience who might be interested. First on the list is Mary Rose Gutierrez, if you'd like to come forward, if you're here. So please state your name and address for the record, and then you get 5 minutes to talk.
My name's Mary Rose Gutierrez, and I reside at 750 Fordham Street. And I'm to the east of the development in unincorporated Boulder County. And what I'm concerned about is, listening to what was going on today, I feel like I don't even have a chance in the world, but I'm going to say my piece anyway. And that piece is I'm concerned about how tall is the structure going to be, because I am concerned about the value of my property. The value of that property that they're building is going to be, $500,000 homes? I have no idea what those homes are going to be going for. But their values are coming with the views that are there. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be planted there in that spot. So that's one concern. How tall is it going to be? Can they make them as big as they want to? Also, I'm wondering if there's going to be a garage, are they going to also be able to add on to that, causing even more of an obstruction of the panoramic views that I have and my neighbors have and have had for a long time. Worried about the lighting. Are you going to have large street lights all over the place? So we sleep with the lights on all the time. I mean, I'm just not used to that. And also the fences. Where are the fences going to be? Are the fences going to be in front of the ditch? Who's going to decide how big the fences will be? What kind of fence material will they be? That kind of thing. Worried about the traffic noise, crime, that kind of stuff when you have more people? Is there going to be an HOA so that there'll be at least somebody that will make sure that rules are enforced in the development? I'm not quite sure where the storm and the waste piping is going to be, where that drainage is going to be, but I'm concerned about that too. And I think that's about it for today anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. Next on the list is Diane Klug.
My name is Diane Klug, and my husband's and my main concern is the water drainage. We have a well. When they put the sewer system down the road on Fordham Street, it cut our water in half, and now you're going to be putting a lot of houses over there to the west, and that's going to block more water, and we're concerned that you're going to cut our water off for our well. And wondering what your solution for that is. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Klug. Next is Don Dolce.
Don Dolce, 314 Bristol Place, Chairman, Airport Advisory Board. I think the letter that was submitted pretty well summarizes the situation relative to how the airport board feels about continued residential development within the airport influence zone. We're really not in favor of that. We are in favor of the annexation, however. That letter summarized the impact of the noise that you might anticipate based upon the study that was done for the master plan in 2012. One of the things that has occurred just recently is you see the mile-high skydiving aircraft now operating on the north side of the airport. They're not confined to the south side anymore. So part of the noise that was typically on the north side or the south side is now moving to the north when those planes are below 10,000 feet and they're favoring runway 11 for their landing. So a simple calculation would show that on days when they're operating, and they operate about 84 hours a week, certainly not at a uniform rate, but you can anticipate even if they were just doing one landing per hour, approximately another 1,000 passes over the vicinity of this development. And if they were doing several passes, several landings per hour, and we know that they operate quite often with 3, 4, and 5 drops per hour, they will cluster quite a few runs over these properties. Our goal is, at the airport, of course, to mitigate the noise complaints. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dolce. Looks like George Maxiller? Sorry, having a little trouble reading.
My name is George Marksmiller, and I live at 725 Fordham. And my property is the one that's directly, excuse me, east of this development. If you could bring back the map of the houses that you want to put in there, just for fun.
There you go, sir.
If you notice on the south side, there looks like a road that continues to the east. Now, directly to the east of the property is a approximately 20 feet storm drain, concrete lined and probably 8 feet deep. So I'm wondering, because I own the property directly east of that road, is there any intention to try to get my land to continue that road? One question. And if not, then I wouldn't wonder why, when I saw that original project that was going to be developed that had a circular road that came out, why wasn't, or could that possibly be incorporated in this, which would give that open space to the south a little more area? And I'd be concerned about fencing too. I have a privacy fence on the east side of the storm drain that kind of protects my animals from getting in the storm drain. I'm completely fenced on the west side of my property, and in fact all around my property, which was hit by the flood. There are two houses directly east, not just one. There's one up on 9th. No, that's fine. There's one up on 9th that Mr. Gadea owns, and then I own the 4.5 acres to the south. So I was wondering if there was going to be semi-privacy fences that would be on the east side of the storm drain. And I think that would be, they'd need to do that just because it could be a hazard, because I've found dead animals in that storm drain that got in there. I'm in favor of the project. I know it's going to happen, and I was just kind of curious. I think with all the development that's going around Longmont, it'll probably be over 100,000 soon, which is fine. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Marksmiller. Last on our list is Dale Van Zandt.
Good evening. I'm Dale Van Zandt, 2976 Dunes Court. I am also the Vice Chairman of the Airport Advisory Board, but here tonight in a personal capacity. And again, I would echo Chairman Dolce's concerns about noise. The noise, this area is going to be just outside the city recommended flight path for planes doing pattern work on runway 11. And they'll be turning from, excuse me, they'll be taking off, making a left turn to crosswind, making a left turn to downwind. Where they make that left turn to downwind from crosswind, their belly will be exposed to this subdivision. And they'll be generating a fair amount of noise. And really, we don't need any more noise complaints from the airport. And while I agree that we have no responsibility or authority to recommend anything to you guys, certainly we are looking at development of the airport. And I would be remiss as a member of the Airport Advisory Board if I didn't look at things that impacted potential development of the airport itself as well. It's a major economic draw to the city, just like Circle Graphics, although probably not quite as, we don't have 450 people employed out there. So anyway, when we're using runway 11, we'll be generating a fair amount of noise at that subdivision. Granted, the subdivision to the west of there is not a high source for noise complaints, and hopefully we can do something about that. What I would like for this to see that on the closing documents, I've owned 2 houses in that little area down there, and each time we closed, we had a document that said, we acknowledge we're near an airport and we may get some noise, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to make that a fairly stronger document, and among the other things, to disallow, other than really egregious noise complaints, any noise complaint emanating from that area, and looking ahead from the area that's under proposal further west on the other side in the southwest corner of 9th and Airport. And that's where I would like to go with that. I think this is fine in terms of layout, and having owned 2 houses in that area, the noise didn't bother me. I'm a pilot, so I guess that's a mitigating factor. I would recommend approval of this. I would like to see a stronger closing document when the people actually sign, and it's not something that's just tossed in a pile that's this thick and says sign it. It doesn't mean anything, because it should mean something if you're going to build knowledgeably near an airport that does generate noise in its normal capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Zandt. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to come forward at this time and talk? Yes, sir. Please give your name and your address. And
my name is Selwyn Goldstein. I live at 649 Wade Road. And I'm concerned about the impact of this subdivision on Wade Road. One of the accesses in and out of the subdivision is on Wade Road. And there's 151 houses in that subdivision, and some of them, including mine, will be impacted on that. I'd like to see the Peakview subdivision have a cul-de-sac at the end of the project so people can go in and go out on Peakview and not use Wade Road. Wade Road is going to become a much heavier used street, as well as Hayden, which is one of the 2 access points into the 151 house subdivision. I'd like to see you folks look at that. And I do live on Wade Road. The airport has a major impact. I've complained a lot about the airplanes that fly over there. The railroad tracks that border the subdivision is a voluntary border that some pilots adhere to, but some pilots go over the railroad tracks and over the subdivision, and specifically there's a couple of biplanes out there that are really loud, and on the weekend they exercise their right to use their airplanes. But I wish they wouldn't fly over the houses. The skydiving, they do not fly over the houses. They stay over open space. They know how loud their planes are. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to come forward and talk at this time? Seeing nobody, we'll close the public hearing and take it back to the commission for discussion and further questions. Commissioner Kohler.
I have a question. I don't know if this is for the applicant or for you, but I noticed that on the east side of the property line, there's 2 high voltage underground power lines, and it seems like this lot is fairly narrow as it is, and so I'm wondering, with that additional encumbrance on the east side, if they really feel like they can get 2 rows of houses and a street and curb and gutter with the assumption that you can't build anything within that easement.
Yes. I think that there are those underground lines there. And this relates in part to the requirements regarding variation in lot size, which in turn relates to the variation in the architectural product size. So when these lots were conceptualized, we spoke with an architectural design team to ensure that, in fact, they would be practical to build on in an appropriate size for those lots. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess so. Is on this map, can you show, is this grayer line that you can see? I don't know if you can see it up there, but I can see it on my screen. Is that the approximate location of the easement?
The easement parallels the drainage ditch that's been discussed, running from north to south along, in this case, the top of that map. And it runs down to a pylon in the far southeast corner of the property.
So the line will essentially, the lines will essentially be in these people's backyard?
Right. This will be an easement across the back of their property, but the setbacks are such that they're not going to encroach upon that easement with any improvements.
Okay. What about the fencing?
Fencing, I'm not sure how to answer that in that, as George was talking earlier, if any of us bought a home there, we'd want a privacy fence on the back. So I expect that there'll be fencing throughout, and it may be that that fencing will be inside the easement and not on the other side of the easement.
And will the property owners be made aware that those lines are in their backyard?
Oh, yes, yeah. You know, there's certain disclosures that have to be made that are shown on the plat. There's a requirement on the plat to acknowledge the presence of the airport and the noise impacts thereof, and that whole issue as well.
And then I guess one last question. I think it's a Western line. Western owns the line, and they had a requirement in their letter that the line be marked on the ground. So will people have those markers in their yards?
They would. They would. And I'm not sure, you know, sometimes we see those markers as an orange plastic stanchion type of thing. I'm not sure what kind of markers they would require for that. Obviously, we want ones that'll have the least amount of impact as possible visually.
Okay.
Well, they probably want the ones that have the most amount of impact.
Other questions? Commissioner Pollard?
Yeah, can you go over really quickly on the far left-hand side of that picture, the continuation of, I believe it's Wade, as it comes across on the bottom, and it was noted, what's happening as it comes further east?
Wade Road actually terminates at the top of this drawing and does not continue on. There is a sanitary sewer line easement and a sanitary sewer line that does continue on through that same area. From our perspective, the Valley subdivision has 151 units in it and 2 exits. We cannot imagine any situation where the people living in this subdivision would want to go next door where there's 151 residences trying to get in or out of the subdivision when there's only 20-some here. So I think the traffic-related impacts probably would tend to flow from the valley, seeing this as an alternative way to get to 9th Avenue rather than the other way around.
And Mr. Young, just to clarify, Mr. Goldstein had said, why couldn't we make Wade Road a cul-de-sac? My understanding is that that would break our fire egress issues. Can you confirm that? Okay. Yes. So that would go against the fire department. Yeah. Right. Okay. Any other questions, concerns, thoughts? Karen, could we just clarify a few things? Thank you, Mr. Young. That some of the public comments brought up. We're approving an annexation, so we have no idea what the exact design is. But like Ms. Gutierrez and Ms. Klug had concerns that are more design related, like what would happen to the views, garages, lighting, fences, traffic, crime, HOA presence or not, what happens with drainage. Could you, and really for the benefit of the folks who've stayed with us this long, could you go through how the city works through this process and what the other steps are, as this project, if this project moves forward, what the other steps would be to have input into all those issues?
Yes, Commissioner Chernick. So a lot of the concerns, I'll go down the list. So with regard to the lighting concerns, the city does have residential lighting standards that reduce light pollution. Any site, whether it's this 27 lot subdivision or a 250 lot subdivision have to include a photometric plan as part of the development process, and we'll have to make sure that the light pollution off-site is not occurring, and that we do have a requirement for light levels across the entire. So we do have standards regarding that. You are correct. This is just the annexation to actually really bring the property into the city of Longmont. Part of that is an approval of a concept plan so that the city really has an understanding of what they're getting when they bring the property into the city, if that does occur. If the annexation is approved, the applicant is going to need to come back through the platting process. In this case, the applicant is asking for straight R1 zoning with no PUD overlay. So all development of the residences would need to agree with the R1 zoning requirements. There was some concern about the heights. We do have, there is a height standard. I'm looking through my list trying to find it really quick here.
I think it's usually around about 30 feet or something like that.
Yeah, correct. In the R1 zoning, it's about 30 feet, and it also is effective on the width of the lot and where the placement of the house, because we also have side yard and front yard setbacks, and the side yard setbacks especially have to do with the height of the building. So there's that. With regard to the garages, we do have residential design standards that do not allow for a single-family residence for the garage to take up more than 50% of the front of the building. While we do have minimum square footage for residences, we do not have maximum. However, we do have a percentage of lot coverage. You can't go over a certain percentage. Throughout this process, when the applicant does come back through for the preliminary plat, if the annexation is approved, the applicant will once again have to notice the neighbors and give the neighbors a chance to look at the plan and make comments on the plan. There will be another public hearing before Planning and Zoning Commission to be able to look at the product, the type of house that's being built, what the landscaping, the final landscaping is going to look like, what the lighting is going to look like. So we're really at this point at the preliminary stage. Again, the storm drainage is something that has come up, and the water wells, and that is again part of the platting process. Part of that will be a drainage plan that's going to need to be submitted. It's going to be reviewed by the city to make sure that that the stormwater drainage is managed correctly, and that also that what's happening on site is not affecting water off site. I think that answers all of your questions, Commissioner Scherneck. Were there any I missed?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it does. I just thought of another question, though. Sorry, not going to give you any rest. So it's not, this land is not in an area deemed by FEMA as being in the floodplain, but we heard from Mr. Marksmiller that his property, which is nearby, although some properties can be in the floodplain and some others not, that he was flooded in 2013. We know 2013 we were all surprised that floodwaters came down this set of railroad tracks too. So what do we do? Yes, maybe FEMA says it's not a floodplain, but experience might say otherwise. How do we deal with that as a city?
Overall, as a city, I don't feel comfortable answering. On this particular piece of property, that's part of why the city requires the drainage plans, because we want to understand both the historical drainage on the property, how is water moving, what's the topography. So part of the drainage plan is showing us historically what's been the drainage on this property, how has that worked, and how are you making sure that whatever development you put on the property does not affect any of the historical off-site drainage. So that's part of that review process, and our staff member that reviews drainage plans, she puts a lot of time and effort into making sure.
So you're using the word historical since it was 3 years ago. Would we now be considering 2013 floods as part of that historical data? Yeah, okay, so that goes into the analysis now then.
Correct.
Okay, great, good. That's good to know. Any other questions? Commissioner Goldberg.
Hey, Karen. One of our folks in the audience, Ms. Klug, was concerned about access to her well, or the water access to her well. Could you help provide her some comfort as far as what can we do to assure her, or what would have to happen if, is there any way that we could impact her access to her water, and what would go down if that were to happen?
I'm not sure how much of what I say is going to comfort, because at this point it all goes back to the drainage plan and the engineering that will go into the development of the storm water drainage system. And while the applicant is giving the city studies and proposals, the city is reviewing those to make sure that they're accurate and they do match what is actually happening and what is going on. So I can say that, you know, when we look at the drainage plan and when we look at the development and putting in the storm sewer and all of that, the city is going to do everything we can to make sure that we are not affecting wells off-site, that we are not affecting drainage and causing flooding and problems elsewhere. But beyond that, I don't know how much assurance I can give.
Any other questions, discussion? Commissioner Poland.
I'll throw in my 2 cents. Looking at what we have before us today, we have the annexation and the zoning for R1, and then also the basic concept plan. I think everybody here seems to be in agreement of the annexation, and there's very few comments about it being R1. They are putting in 27 units, proposing 27 units over 7 acres. That's just a little bit over 3. That's nothing too bad. That seems pretty good. And for the concept plan, and this gets into the concept plan, I think putting in R1, kind of dispersed 3 per acre isn't too big, is a good concept plan for that piece of property. It's an agreement to the property to the west of it. And just over to the east a little bit is Golden Pond, I believe, and so it agrees with that. So I am for the annexation concept plan and zoning for this proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner Poland. I would agree with your analysis, and I agree with staff's analysis, so I'll make a motion to approve PZR 2016-17A. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Poland. Is there further discussion or questions or thoughts? Let's take a vote. Okay, so PZR 2016-17A is approved 7-0. This item will now be forwarded to the Longmont City Council for action. If you're unfamiliar with council procedures and intend to appear before council, please contact the Planning Division for further information at 303-651-8330. Thank you to the applicant for coming tonight. We appreciate your time and effort. Thank you, Karen, for your presentation. Next on our agenda is item 9, the Quails Commercial Center preliminary plat rezoning and variance requests for site plan with Principal Planner Don Burchett.
Chairman Chernick.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to, I was remiss in not introducing Karen Bryant to all of you at the beginning of the meeting today. So Karen has been with us since January. Karen's a senior planner. She's been working in development review. So my apologies for not introducing her at the beginning of the meeting because I believe this is the first time she's been here. Karen has also recently accepted our half-time position as our historic preservation planner as well. So she will continue to be here, but I was remiss as I was sitting here thinking, forgot that. So my apologies.
Yes. Good job, Karen. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Yes.
If we're ready?
Yes,
all right.
we are ready.
That's
Sorry.
a tough act to follow up there. So, Chairman Chernak, members of the Planning Commission, Don Burchett with Planning and Development Services, have a brief presentation. I'll try not to go too long on it tonight. And the project that we're looking at right now is the Quail Commercial Center rezoning preliminary plat and request for some variances for setbacks for the site plan that we're also currently reviewing on the proposed Lot 1 for this development. The specific applications, we've broken them out into 2 PZRs for you to look at tonight. The first application that you're going to be looking at is a rezoning request, and that's covered under PZR 2016-20. As the Commission would know, the rezoning request is a request that will ultimately end up going to the City Council for a determination of whether or not to grant the rezoning. The Commission's job tonight is to evaluate the rezoning request and make a recommendation to the City Council based on the information that's presented tonight and the information that was presented in your packet. The second item, which is the preliminary plat, is covered under PZR 2016-21. The preliminary plat is a application, again, that the Planning Commission will actually be the decision-making body on tonight, and the PZR 21 will be the instrument in which you can either approve with conditions, or deny the request. And then wrapped into PZR 2016-21, we've also included language for the variances that are requested for the site plan for the hotel on Lot 1 that we'll be getting into. I'll touch on briefly in the applicant's presentation. We'll give you more information on that. Hopefully the information in the packet also helps with some of the understanding of what they're requesting. So to begin, I want to, because some of you have been here for a while and some of you haven't been here quite as long, so I want to give a little bit of a background. What we have up on the screen right now is an aerial photograph of the property outlined in yellow that was annexed back in 2013, and it was known as the Quail Commercial Annexation. The property is located generally at the northeast corner of Quail Road and Main Street, and as you can see, cutting across almost through the northernmost portion of the property is Left Hand Creek. Just off of at the top up here on the right is the Lowe's building that was in Harvest Junction. And then off to our east and to the right, we have the City of Longmont's museum, as well as the Recreation Center, which is all a part of the city's Quail Campus project, which is a recreation facility. The couple of residential areas that people may be familiar with would be the Quail Ridge subdivision to the south, and then Southmore Park as you head over to the south and to the west across Main Street. The reason that it's important to understand the background for where this property sits and the annexation itself is that in 2013, as part of the annexation that was presented not only to the Planning Commission for recommendation but ultimately to City Council, was a proposed land swap with the city and a negotiation that happened and was approved by the City Council that would allow for the city to swap a corner of the Quail campus up at the Main and Quail Road intersection for a piece that is back and closer to our museum and the parking area that is generally to the north and to the west of the museum. And so in the annexation agreement, there were certain obligations and agreements that were made within that annexation, and part of what you're looking at tonight with the rezoning is one of the things that has to happen on the parcels for the swap to occur with the city. Now, going back prior to the annexation, in 2008, the City Council reviewed and accepted and approved a master plan for the Quail campus. It showed how the property would be laid out, and you can kind of see the property boundary for the city's property that we owned at the time. And it sits in that same configuration today. And also, just for those of you who know, over to the right is the Harvest Junction Village residential subdivision that was approved a couple of years ago as well by Oakwood Homes. But this shows how back in 2008 the City Council had accepted a plan by the Parks Department that had gone through a public process, included the various property owners and neighbors and residents that lived down in that area, and showed what the city expected the Quail campus area to develop as, having the recreation center, the museum with future additions, having a ice facility for hockey and skating, as well as a tennis facility. It also at that time showed additional parking areas and the development of the property along the Main Street area, which included the piece that the city owned at that time. It's important to note that at this time in 2008 we were working with Panattoni Development on finishing up our Harvest Junction North development where the Best Buy is, as well as working with them. They had recently purchased the mall, and at that time they were looking at trying to redevelop the mall at that time. So they were a partner with us who was looking at trying to figure out how to develop this parcel that was a remnant and really an enclave in the city that had not been developed and had kind of been jumped around. As we then went to 2013, there was a master plan update to the facility, and I'm going to flip back and forth a couple times so you can kind of see the differences. So if you're motion sickness like I get sometimes, don't really watch too much. But as we can see here in 2008, what changes if you look up in this top right-hand corner here is watch where the ice facility and the tennis courts go. They basically switch. They go from the ice facility being on this central area to going up to the northeast corner of the property. The rest of the area within the development generally stays the same. It still shows the additional development that would occur over along Main Street. Shows again how the parking area for the future museum facility would look. It shows where the Stewart Auditorium has currently been built and constructed. And again shows how this property fit in with the current master plan. That was adopted, this update was adopted right around the time when this property was being annexed. It was actually going through the public hearing process at that time. As a part of the annexation, the applicant, M&R, went and had a plan completed that matched their concept plan for their annexation and overlaid it on the master plan to show how the property could actually be developed based on the constraints on the property. And because they had gone through a little bit more fine-tuning with the annexation and the development scenarios that could occur on the property, started to identify areas where they could do development, trying to meet the setbacks, the restrictions that were on the property with the floodplain, and then also trying to make that connection into the city so that we could figure out what that negotiation looked like for the swap parcels. Okay, so we had to get a little bit more detail. And as you're going to see tonight, this plan that shows the location of the hotel and the variances that you're going to look at was identified and shown to try to sit in this location in 2013 with a different scenario than what they ended up with, which gets into the public road system that we had to provide versus private driveways that was talked about in the staff report. Okay, but again, the main thing is that as council saw this and approved it, again, they looked at the master plan as well as the comprehensive plan, and then approved the application for the annexation and the concept plan showing this layout that in general you're looking at tonight. So the first request, again, that you're going to be making a recommendation on is the rezoning request. So what I did is I blew up the area that goes from Quail Road up to where the new road is that would come into the property off of Main Street on the left-hand side. So north is up in this picture. The hotel lot would be generally where it says zoning request at the top of the screen. And so the rezoning request is to take the existing tract B, which is down up here in the right-hand corner, and change that property from C commercial to P public, and to take the city's parcel that is currently zoned P public and change it to C commercial. So that's the first request that you would be looking at and making a recommendation to the City Council on tonight. The second request that you're going to be looking at, and that is your decision to make, is again the request to approve the preliminary plat. And I apologize at this scale; it's a busy drawing. I'm not quite able to clean these up to try to make them really stand out for what the lots look like. But what you're seeing here is one showing where the road that would be, I believe this is Kimbark Street as I recall, being built along the middle of the property that would come in off of Quail Road. It would be the delineator between the city's parcel, both existing and the new piece, as well as the future trade parcel that would go to the applicants for the future commercial development at that corner. It also then shows the new street that would run east and west into the property that originally was identified through the concept plan to be a private driveway. And the best example I can give you of the way to think about this is that for those of you that have been to either the mall or to, well, what used to be the mall, Village at the Peaks, to the Lowe's Harvest Junction east and west, or even some of the King Super Safeway developments around town. You drive in through a private driveway and you may not know it, but you're driving across lot lines. And so the impacts to having to provide a public street versus a private drive is that now we have setbacks that are not necessarily being measured from the middle of a private driveway, but they're now being measured on the edge of the right-of-way, so typically behind the sidewalk of a public street. So the impacts for setbacks then to the original design are significant, which are talked about again in the variances that you'll be looking at. But ultimately what this preliminary plat does is that it creates outlots for the city's greenway, where currently we have an easement across those properties. We will be given that land for the city to own for our Left-Hand Creek Greenway. We will be creating two lots north of the east-west street, Lot 1 where the hotel would go, and Lot 2, which is where a portion of the parking lot is shown for the hotel, which would be shared with future development that is shown to occur on the west or the east side of Lot 2 next to the city's Quail campus. And then we have the swap parcel lot that's being created, Lot 4, as well as a lot for the future commercial area that would be next to the swap parcel. The final item again that you're going to look at, and I'm not going to get into each one of the variances, but within your packet we identified what the variances are for the hotel based on the changes that occurred, based on the odd shape of this parcel with the dedication for the greenway and fitting in with the existing pedestrian connections and improvements that were built long ago by the city and then put back after the flood. So there are some constraints here that I'm going to let Barb get into and talk about with her presentation. But the important thing is that there are 5 variances then that are being looked at tonight for the hotel. Tonight, again, we need recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission through a PZR on the rezoning request. And we need a decision, hopefully tonight, on the setback variances and the preliminary plat by the Planning Commission tonight. The city staff has reviewed all of these applications. We believe that they do meet the review criteria. We believe that the rezoning should be recommended for approval to the City Council through PZR 2016-20. We believe that the preliminary plat meets the review criteria for a preliminary plat. The site plan variances, we believe, meet the standard as well. And we are recommending approval of PZR 2016-21, but with condition. The condition is that the final few site plan issues that we still have to work out amongst staff and the applicant just be completed before we approve that site plan. That would be the only condition for that PZR. And with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Don. Any questions, Commissioner Height?
Yeah, Don, my initial question is, with respect to the rezoning, it looks to me like we're splitting 2 lots into 4 lots and then swapping them. Is there a subdivision that has to be approved?
Commissioner Height, you are correct. And let me go back. So I didn't cover that. I apologize. So if we look at, yeah. So the city is currently processing a minor subdivision on the lot that we own. Okay. So the entire Quail campus to create 2 lots. Because that's a minor subdivision, that's a staff level approval. We are allowed as a staff to approve a subdivision that approves 3 lots or less, unless there are variances or issues that would need to come to the Planning Commission. So the creation right now is pending this creation of this lot, but the area has been defined, and we are, in general, we are just, I won't say waiting for the applicant. I would say it's mostly we are waiting for all of these items to catch up to make sure everything's going to be approved before we record that plat. That plat, for the most part, is ready to be approved by staff. Okay, so that creates our first lot and gave us the legal description for the rezoning for that parcel, and then the preliminary plat to create the other swap parcel that is being rezoned is through the preliminary plat, which would then be final platted through the swap process.
Other questions for Don at this time? Thank you, Don. Does the applicant have a presentation?
They have a few things for you, so I'm going to
Okay,
exit out of some stuff and we'll get it ready for you.
Okay.
Do you want the video first, Barb? That one right there, right? Site tour?
Yeah.
Do I click it or?
There is audio too, so it'll come through the system.
We think.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Okay, so just click on it. Can I say hello?
Yeah, say hello, and then you can.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, we are so excited to be here this evening. We've been in the process for a long time with this project, and we have a presentation about what you're going to look at tonight, but we also have a site design fly-through that talks about the context and the views from the museum and things like that that was prepared by Tom Moore and his office. And so we'd like to start with that 2-minute video, which kind of gives you the story of what we're going to do. And in a perfect world, it'll work.
At the outset of the design, the importance of maintaining the mountain views
How do I change
from the Longmont Museum and the
volume?
Recreation Center was understood. We began by modeling the site, buildings, and the views toward the west, the Colorado Front Range.
Somebody else has to draw.
This mixed-use commercial center is envisioned to include retail, professional and business services, and residential uses.
That's as loud as it gets.
In stark contrast
So
to much of today's
there is a really nice
commercial
narration that goes with this, but if
the
you'll look
Quail
at it as we go
Commercial
through,
Center
it is
comes
about
with a
the
simple
architecture
palette of
in the
materials
context
and
of the
enduring
neighborhood.
design forms to create a village-like
Do you want to
setting.
talk? Okay.
Along Main Street and Quail Road.
So now we're at
one
Main
and
Street,
two-story commercial
looking
buildings
back toward the
scaled to
campus.
complement
That was the part,
nearby residential neighborhood.
this is looking back at the museum.
The new commercial center creates a vibrant edge of buildings that frame views of the museum and recreation center and invite pedestrians to enter and engage the project. On the north edge of the center is the Homewood Suites Hotel. Brick masonry was selected as a major building component. It is an enduring material found in much of Longmont's architecture, both past and present. Brick parapet gables are a common design element to add a sense of historic character and dignity. The left-hand greenway is an important edge to
So
the
this is
site
Left-Hand
design.
Creek.
In this project, a convenient location has been provided for inclusion of a new public restroom, picnic shelter, and trail access for greenway visitors. The greenway is an attractive amenity for hotel guests while they enjoy the patio and indoor pool. guests will also have easy access to enjoy the nearby cultural and recreational facilities.
That's the museum in the
mixed-use
back.
office and residential building on the left will enjoy dramatic views of the Greenway and the entire site. And a unique public pavilion will accommodate public and private uses, including a location for the historic Tanaka vegetable stand, long associated with this site. The design of the Quail Commercial Center provides a mixture of buildings and uses that will encourage citizens to come and enjoy this significant location. The project is responsive to the community context, including the museum and recreation center to the east, the left-hand greenway to the north, and the residential neighborhoods to the south. Most importantly, this project supports and enhances the city's original master plan for this development, including circulation patterns, screened parking, and views of the city facilities from Main Street. The Quail
That's the 10-cent
Commercial
tour.
Center.
Okay, now, how do I get back to my folder?
I could rename it.
You can call it whatever you want. Again, I'm Barb Brunk, a landscape architect with Resource Conservation Partners. Also with me this evening is Bill Novel, who is the landowner with MNR, and Tom Moore, who is the architect, who has done the site design and the architecture on the project, and Todd Borger, who is our site engineer. So we have a full team of people here to answer any questions that you might have as we go forward. Again, simple, big picture. Okay, context. And again, Don kind of went through this. We're down there at the corner of Main and Quail Road, right in front of the rec center. Here's that aerial again. And you can kind of see, again, museum, the city. This is the city piece that we're acquiring, and this is the piece that's going back. This site is a very unique piece of property. It was a remnant left from when Harvest Junction was developed, and it came with an extraordinary burden of off-site infrastructure and reimbursements. So it's a very small piece of property with a lot of cost associated with it. And so part of the design was to make sure that we could make it economically viable as we move forward. And part of the issue with having public streets come through it makes less ground available for some of those other things. And that really is the underlying issue about those setback variances, because by the time you pull out the greenway, pull out a public street that goes this way and a public street that goes this way, there's this very thin piece of ground left between the access that runs into the campus and the creek. And so if you look at making that useful and making it a site design so that the parking can be shared with the adjacent public facilities, it says from a site design point, push the buildings closer to Main Street so they front onto Main Street, put the parking behind the buildings so it's more accessible to the rest of the Quail campus, and that pushes it into the skinny part of the property over there on the hotel. So it was not a random way that we came to the design that is asking for those variances, and just wanted to kind of show you that in the context. Again, I turned this so you could kind of see it in the context. Don went through this. This is our site. The rezoning, again, city to commercial and private to public. There's our preliminary plat. This is the site layout, and again, here's that context. So here's Main Street. This is that public street coming through here. This is the public street coming through here. This is going to be future parking. The other commitment we made at the time the property was annexed was to share the parking on the campus with the rec center and the Quail campus recreation facility, because when they need the parking, we won't need the parking. You know, it's a perfect place not to have too much pavement and to share the parking with the campus. So the the hope is that people at the museum will walk across and have dinner at the shopping center. People at the hotel will walk across to events at the museum or go work out at the rec center and then have access to the greenway. So it makes a neighborhood center that is focused on connectivity, pedestrian connectivity and vehicular connectivity that complements that corridor. And it's kind of an infill project, again, on a very challenging piece of property. This is a site plan. So one of the things that when I'm trying to make the straight face for a variance is, what did you do to compensate for it? So everywhere that there was a buffer requirement and a planting requirement, we accommodated the number of plantings. If we didn't have enough room to put them in the location required, we put them someplace else on the property. So there's no effort to put less than the requirement on the property. Actually, there's almost twice the number of plantings that are required on this property just because of the context and the site design and making it function and beautiful. So it's not that they were trying to skate. And every time there's a variance, there's a compensation for it that way. Okay, so here's our variance list. So the first variance is to come down here along the greenway and bump in at this point from 30 to 20, and from this point from 30 to 20, and someday from this point from 30 to 20. But along the rest, it gets wider, and there's extra plantings. When we went through the process to annex the property, we actually went through the habitat conservation process. And while the setback wasn't an issue, the person who looked at it first was worried about habitat, extra plantings for wildlife, and drainage and water quality. So you'll see in the landscape plan in your packet that along this edge, there's a lot of extra plantings that create that habitat, that define the edge, that don't necessarily block the view into the greenway, but that complement that juxtaposition between public and private and make it so that the hotel feels integrated into the site. But it is closer, so that's one of the variances. The other one is here, again, if this had been a private drive, the hotel could have moved this way, and we wouldn't have had to bump so close to the greenway. The next one is because it's a thing, and we couldn't bump it. There's a porte cochere at the front of the hotel, which is right here. And so the request is to have a 10-foot setback instead of a 20-foot setback. And that's kind of gateway. I mean, the context of the design is to have an urban place where you walk up to the front of a building, and more setback doesn't necessarily make that better. It's not maybe as inviting as it might be as if it in that context of close. I think along this road, it's the same idea that you're creating a room in the street, and the buildings help create that room in the street in addition to the streetscape and the landscaping. The next three are along the parking area through here. So there's not enough room because of the width of this property to get a landscape buffer between the driveway and the here, and between the parking area and here, and between the parking area and here. What we've done is packed every bit of plant materials into those areas that we could get. Some of them are encumbered by utilities underneath, so we couldn't put too many things in. If they aren't accommodated in those buffers, they're someplace else on the site. They're either additional foundation plantings, so they anchor the structure a little better on the site as far as landscaping, so that physically they're there between the building and the street, but they're next to the building instead of out in a buffer between the parking lot and the road through that area. We really believe we meet the criteria. This is not a self-imposed hardship. The site is the site. In the context of creating a beautiful, integrated, mixed-use neighborhood, I think we've met the intent of the code, and going through each one of those, I think we meet the variance criteria as well. And I actually have a list. So the causes are that the alignment of the streets create a narrow, irregular parcel. And so to make a square in that funky little rectangle with the setbacks all around doesn't function properly. The variance will allow for development of a beautiful, functional, mixed-use neighborhood. The location of the access points are constraints. So they're physical constraints, not picked up by the applicant, but required by city code as far as access to the site. And the cross-section for that specific access is wider than a private drive, so it takes up more room and takes up that area that might have been a buffer otherwise. There is not another feasible solution to build the hotel in this location on this site. And as I said, I mean, you could move it away from Main Street, but that kind of defeats the purpose of having frontage on Main Street and creating that edge for the south part of town. And the spirit of, we believe we've met the spirit and intent of the code by putting the required landscaping elsewhere on the property, and actually adding to the landscaping is required. And we don't believe they create a safety hazard. I also think we meet the rest of the preliminary plat and the rezoning criteria per the code as outlined in your staff recommendation and in the letter that we submitted. And we're here to answer questions if you have any. I have the a few extra slides if you want to look at the circulation system for the multimodal plan, a little bit more information about the architecture, and I do have those landscape plans so that you can see we really did think it through to make the context beautiful and functional, not trying to skate. Thank you so much. We respectfully ask for your approval, and we're here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Brunk. Any questions? Commissioner Height?
It's a variance question.
I commend you for a very clever and thoughtful design. But my question, maybe now you can answer, maybe I just missed this. Why are we going with public streets here?
Well, we're accessing Main Street, which is an arterial, and you can't put a driveway onto an arterial street inside the city code. And the Quail Road access was determined based on the master plan. But, you know, when we came forward, we thought of it as like a commercial subdivision, which has private drives throughout. They're all over town. But when you look at the context of Main Street and this site, it can't meet the code to do that. So we have to go to CDOT for an access permit, and driveways don't cut it.
Other questions? I have a question for you. It seems as though the only concept for this small sliver of land to the north of Kansas Avenue has been a hotel. What analysis has been done to determine whether another use that might have been a smaller footprint could have given just as good of returns and therefore met the setbacks, met your economic requirements, et cetera?
Bill Novel owns the hotel located just to the north of this property, the Hampton Inn, and he bought the property with the intention of developing a hotel on the site. He came to the city and talked to staff prior to buying the property, and the issue about the road wasn't part of the conversation. When you look at, again, the location and the parking and the context, I also think in the, it was always intention to build a hotel. The extra stuff for him is a gift as far as commercial development that is tax revenue to the city. So we did not look at another use because a hotel was a primary use identified at the time they purchased the property.
Okay. And Don, in the master plan, this was always considered to be a hotel use there? Or?
No.
No, it wasn't, but at annexation, that was presented to the city council and even planning commission, that was one of the uses that was going to go on the property.
Okay, because that is my memory of it when it came through for annexation as well. So, okay. Commissioner Kohler.
Yeah, I feel like I need to represent Commissioner Flagg that's not here today, and she would probably ask a question about pedestrian access, and I can't tell very well from the drawings, but how well can a pedestrian access the museum and the rec center from the hotel?
So this is the multimodal plan, and there's a couple of ways. If you're here at the hotel, there's sidewalks on, these are public streets, so there's detached sidewalks on both sides of the street. There's also an access here, up out of the greenway and coming under the street, out of the greenway for the general public to get in and out. And then we've created another access onto the greenway that gets people up out of the greenway into this site. So it's through this transportation system, and then we've put in a pedestrian connection that goes from Main Street through here that will come through the city parking lot in the future.
And will the pedestrian access be built around the parking lot? Will that happen immediately, or will that be with the future development of that commercial site?
This piece through here will come when that property is developed, but the detached sidewalks will be built with the roads at the time the property is developed. And they're required for access, so they go in with the hotel.
Other questions at this time? Commissioner Pullen?
Barb, I just want to make sure I understand the variances 3A, B, and C. And so basically, if I understand it, the city requires 20 feet from the street to the parking lots.
From the right-of-way.
From the right-of-way.
Yeah. And so what we've requested is to use the landscaping in the right-of-way as part of that buffer.
That's what I was trying to make sure I understood is, so that instead of the 20 feet, you're going to go ahead and say from the right-of-way, you're going to say, we're going to go from the street and there's 8 feet of trees and stuff, and then there's 5 feet of sidewalk. So there's 13 feet, and then at some places there's 3.5 feet, some places there's 0.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're trying to take credit for the landscaping in the right-of-way as part of the buffer, as opposed to giving another 20 feet inside the right-of-way.
Okay, this is a public hearing item, so thank you, Ms. Brunk. We will open the public hearing. There's nobody signed up. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak? I think we only have the applicants left in the audience, and staff, and visitors. So we'll close the public hearing, and we'll go back to discussion and thoughts from the commission. Commissioner Kohler.
I would agree with Commissioner Hyatt. I think it sounds like a lot of thought has gone into this over the years and even recently, and it seems like the variances are all very justified given the quirkiness of the property, and I don't have any issues with any of them.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that totally not a self-imposed hardship, because we are dealing with what would have been a private drive turning into a public street. It's not up to the applicant on that regard. So the variances do seem merited, and the analysis seems correct to me. We also have the preliminary plat, and that doesn't seem to be a problem to me either. I appreciate Ms. Brunk's point that wherever they are taking a variance, they're adding something else elsewhere. Not all applicants do that, so appreciate that. The rezoning completely makes sense. It's something that's been discussed about for this entire project for a long time, to do this land swap and to do the rezoning. That seems to also meet all of the criteria. Any other discussion? Commissioner Goldberg?
In the packet, we have some comments from the neighborhood meeting that address the view from the walkway. And we haven't discussed that at all tonight, so maybe, gosh, I'm not sure, but maybe we'll start with, is it Barb? Sorry. Yeah, Barb, I apologize. Would you just speak a little bit about this view that's brought up? It's in the packet, and maybe what you're doing to address it, or what's happening there?
Straight-faced. This part of this building will block the view from that walkway that goes around that lake. There are some windows through the property that will still see the view. If you look, I'm trying to think if I have an image. Here. This kind of shows. So it's this walkway around the lake that they were talking about. So in some places, you're looking right down the road, and you'll be looking right at the view. As you look across this way, you're looking across the view this way. These buildings will, means, again, straight face block the view. Unless you don't develop that property, the view won't be there. But they are low enough. We did look at the view from the museum from up above, and when you're down there, even when you're standing on the site, the buildings are lower than the trees across the street. And so they don't add to the blockage of the additional stuff because you're so far away. You know, how a cone goes, the further you are away, the least impact it has. And those buildings across the main street are as far from that walk as you can get on this property and still be there. But will it be changed? Absolutely. And I actually had the same discussion in the room with the people who were there that evening, said straight-faced, it is what it is. So.
Thank you.
Other questions? So Don is suggesting, well, not suggesting, we have in front of us two PZRs. One is for the zoning, PZR 20A, and that's a recommendation to City Council. The other, I shouldn't say 20A, just PZR 2016-20. The other is 2016-21, which is for the preliminary plat and the variances. I would suggest that we make two motions, one for each PZR, rather than doing one motion to approve two PZRs. Dan, does that sound fair, proper, close enough?
Chair Shernick, indeed.
Okay, all right. So, Commissioner Bowling.
Yes, I'll make this easy then. Let's begin with, I would like to recommend that we approve PZR 2016-20A.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of PZR 2016-20A. Do we have a second?
A second.
Commissioner Kohler seconds. Any further discussion on this particular PZR? Let's take a vote. So PZR 2016-20A passes unanimously 7-0. We have another PZR in front of us, 2016-21. Thoughts, discussion, any motions?
I'll just say that, you know, I'm in favor for this. We've already gone through this. The big thing was the variances, but in looking at what they had to work with, they've done a good job with organizing it. The variances really are just with parking lots, and so I don't have a big deal with that. So I'll go ahead and approve or recommend that we approve PZR 2016-21B with the conditions that they finish up the required stuff that staff is talking with them about.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve PZR 2016-21B. Commissioner, well, actually, Commissioner Height had his light
Yeah,
on.
I just have one more comment that I wanted to add to this too, but I can wait until after you second.
Okay, so Commissioner Teta has seconded. Commissioner Height, your comments, please.
And again, addressing the variance aspect of this PZR, again, this I believe is a uniquely positioned property, and the difficulties are not necessarily self-imposed, and the variances for they're basically setbacks. One is from the property line, and the others, I believe, are for the parking lot, are within the spirit of the code, and with that, I would vote to approve it.
Thank you, Commissioner Height. Any further discussion? Commissioner Goldberg?
I would just like to applaud the applicant for going above and beyond, especially as it relates to the planting. It's refreshing to have an applicant acknowledge that they are needing some flexibility in the code, and doing everything they can to accommodate that and offset that with some other improvements. So thank you.
And there's also the issue of the applicant's tenacity, too. It's been a long time since we saw this for annexation, and it's great to see it back again. So let's take a vote. So PZR 2016-21B passes unanimously 7-0. So for PZR 2016-21B, it's this. That item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing. and must be received by, in the city clerk's office and the planning office within the 7-day appeal period, which begins Thursday, September 22 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, September 28 at 5 p.m. For PZR 2016-20A, it's a city council action, and this item will now be forwarded to the Longmont City Council for action. If you're unfamiliar with council procedures and intend to appear before council, please contact the Planning Division for further information at 303-651-8330. Thank you to the applicants for your presentation. Really appreciate you hanging out with us until 10:10 p.m. Dawn, thank you for your presentation as well, and we will move on with the rest of our meeting agenda. Item 10 is final call, public invited to be heard. Nobody's signed up, Jane? Nobody's signed up? Is there anybody in the audience left? Nobody is in the audience coming forward. We'll close the public invited to be heard. Any items from anybody in the commission? Seeing none, we'll move on to items from, no, Bonnie Finley has left, so we miss her. Items from Planning and Development Services Director Joni Marsh.
I just want to say one thing. If anyone noticed, there's air conditioning tonight.
Yes,
so it might have taken me 6 months, but there is air conditioning tonight. So I'll pat myself on the back for that. You would think that would be easy. Wrong. Just one thing I wanted to note for October, we wanted to not have a meeting on October 19th, but I think move that to the 26th if that is something you want to put in your calendar. Does anybody have any heartburn immediately with that? Seeing none, I will. And then obviously in November and December, we don't have a fourth meeting because of the holidays, so we'll try to stick to those days if indeed we have a full agenda. I do know we have one thing for next month so far, but likely not 4 things again. So thank you for your patience this evening in getting through all that.
Great. Thank you, Joni. Last item is, unless there's somebody who objects, we will adjourn. All right. Thank you.